this is the final part, folks, in building our garden bed and bringing life back into the soil that became dirt and death. So what we're looking at here, this is bean straw mulch, and you can use any type of mulch to hydrate. And what I'm doing here is not only hydrating it, I'm actually inoculating it with our EcoButch and Liquid Gold. And that soaks into the mulch and activates it, so the composting process begins. And it also, when you apply it to your garden bed, well, it hydrates the garden bed, but it also will activate microbial activity, and that's what you want. So we're putting this down like this, about, well, 3 to 4 inches, no thicker than that. And that's on a fluffy side, so when it does compact down, it'll shrink down to about 50 mil, 2 inches. And that's pretty much it. I want to show you something also when it comes to inoculating your mulch, the difference between doing it and not doing it, the way the mulch ends up later on, because now it's nice and fresh and you can see how, you know, well hydrated it is, and it's full of the organic liquids that we've put into it, and that's going to work its way through. And one thing I didn't do, and my apologies here, folks, we didn't inspect the soil. Now, we spoke about the first stages earlier in the episodes, where we had a really dehydrated soil at the base. It was pretty much dirt. Then we put our cocoa pith and our compost on top of that. And then on top of that, we put our planting mix. But with each layer that we applied, we hydrated it because it was dry. And I left the bags out in the sun and they dehydrated. And I dare say a lot of us got a habit of doing that, or even just in the garden shed where they've been in there for months on end and any life in it is pretty much depleted. So now that's my planting mix and a bit of compost underneath, and this is what it looks like when you hydrate it. See that? Now this took me over 3 days to do it, and I chose to do it that way, take my time, but it doesn't have to take that long. I've done it in the past almost immediately, layer upon layer, hydrating it, and it depends on how much time you have as well. So if you only got a few minutes each day, put one layer down, hydrate it, come back the next day, hydrate it again before you put the next layer on top of it, and sure enough, you'll end up with a beautiful, well spongy, well moist and spongy soil which you're going to grow in. Now if your soil ends up being a little bit sandy, get some of this mulch and dig it in. Mix it through, no harm in mixing it through, but put some back on top at the end as well. So the mulch will start to decompose, the big composting creatures will come along and eat this up, and then that will start to break down into finer particles, and it also gives you body in the soil if your soil otherwise is very sandy or even really hard like clay. If you can't get our planting mix, mix your mulch through it, but inoculate it. Now this is what it looks like when it's inoculated, and this one here isn't really inoculated. Well, it was hydrated, but I didn't allow it to soak overnight or 2 nights, so the actual liquid fertilizer gets right into it and becomes really a part of the whole body, and it starts to decompose. So you can see how fluffy that is, how I grab it, see how that just comes apart. Anywhere I do that, it's really loose. Now let me show you one that's the same age as this, but I allowed it to sit for 3 days to soak well before I applied it into the garden bed. And this is the other one that's been soaking for 3 days, or had been soaked for 3 days before I spread it out everywhere in the garden. Now look how moist this is as well. Look at that. That's breaking down. Look at the worms already getting into there. Spotted one. There's a few in here. There's no point in me trying to dig them all up for you because you've seen it before. And by doing this, you find that it actually activates the soil a lot quicker. Mulch will break down regardless. By adding liquid fertilizer into or soaking it in there for a number of days, not just for a couple of minutes or 10 or 20 minutes, leave it for at least a couple of days so they can inoculate properly and then spread it out into your garden. So folks, if you're building your garden bed from scratch again, or just rejuvenating an existing bed after a big season or a hard season of growing, remember to use quality compost. If you can get your hands on our planting mix, get some of that, and always liquid feed your mulch like I've done here before spreading it into the garden. You'll find all this on our website, VasilisGarden.com, and for those in Thebarton or even South Australia, folks, don't forget, we're going to come to you guys on April the 18th to the 24th, a pop-up store in the Kennards Place. Get your orders in for click and collect and get yourself some planting mix, because you're not going to be able to get it otherwise until we find a store that's going to be able to stock it for us. VasilisGarden.com for everything you need every day. From me, Vasili, Maresi.